yeah, welcome everybody. Sorry about that little glitch there. We will get underway. So welcome everybody to our third edition of Triple Tap. We have an exciting lineup for you this evening. You guys are looking sharp as usual. So have you had a good week? Lance, Kent, have you had a good week, guys?
Oh, look, it's been an incredible week. Some highs, some lows, you know, some really bad stuff today coming out on the internet. People getting doxxed really, really badly. But there you go. We put the word out and it looks like the perpetrators of the doxing have already been identified. So that's the power of this movement that we've got.
Yeah, excellent. What about you, Kent? Have you had a good week?
I've had a fantastic week. I'm enjoying the freezing cold weather that's hitting southeast Queensland. A maximum of, well, it felt like about 4 degrees in southeast Queensland, but it was, you know, about 12 to 14. I'm enjoying that cold weather. I'm enjoying building my house out in the sun and the wind. And of course, I've had a good time preparing for this evening. So a little bit of research and finding out some things about our guest. And I'm excited and ready for the show. So let's go.
Yeah. And everyone, if you're listening tonight, you can participate, follow along in the chat box. Give us a 10 or a number from 1 to 10 if you're excited to hear from our guest speaker tonight. Some of you may have seen the poster that we popped out there, so you may know who we're going to be speaking to. We're very excited to be speaking to him. I'm going to introduce to him in just a moment, and we're going to shoot the breeze with him and ask him lots of questions. We have been speaking a little bit about, or a lot about, the elections over the last 2 weeks because it's a very thing that's been prevalent on everybody's thoughts. Some people sort of took a bit of a dive, you know, with the results of that. So we've been unpacking that with some of our guest speakers over the last 2 weeks. And so tonight is going to be no different. So without further ado, we'll get underway. I'd like to introduce to you this man just before we unveil him on camera. So this man has been passionate about making a difference in politics since the year 2000. He's been a businessman, a horse-drawn carriage driver, a councillor for 6 years, a state MP for 11 years, and a minister in the Queensland government. He's campaigned to introduce medical cannabis to Australia to help those who could no longer cope with the opiate-based drugs they were being prescribed, and advocated fiercely for children with epilepsy and other illnesses where medical cannabis was the only thing offering relief. And he did this at a time when it wasn't yet accepted by many of his peers. He had retired from politics thinking that he had done all that he could. Then, over the past 2 years, the poor decisions in positions of power hit his fellow Australians harder than anything that he could ever have imagined. It became very apparent that he was not, in fact, done. And he made the decision to run as a grouped independent in the recent federal election. Ladies and gentlemen, we bring to you Mr. Steve Dickson. Steve, it's great to have you here tonight. Firstly, tell us your thoughts, feelings, and opinions about the recent election we just had. And do you think it was fair and just, or even handled correctly? And then if you could, share a bit more on what you're currently doing with the AEC at this point in time. So take it away, Steve.
Firstly, Ainsley, thank you very much for having me on, and also to Kent and to Lance. And I've got to point out Lance because he's got the same middle name that I have, and that you can trust those blokes called Lance, particularly Lance a lot. But to get directly into the question you've asked is, no, the election wasn't fair. It was run so poorly. It was valued at $500 million. That's $500 million. That's what it cost the Australian taxpayer. And just to give you our tunnel vision view of where we've gone over the last few weeks, we've been pursuing the AEC relating to information that was given out by their electoral staff to people right across Australia. And that comment that they made and comments were not to vote above the line in those boxes that are empty. Those people are pulled out of the race, or if you vote in those boxes, your vote will be invalid. So, you know, this is pretty serious stuff, and we are pursuing this issue. The AEC have come out in recent times in their disinformation register and said that we actually are the ones who haven't been telling the truth, all independents across the country. And it disappoints me greatly when we have a government body who we are all supposed to trust, we are all supposed to believe in, to hold a federal election, which they only do every 3 years. That's the only job they've got. They don't have any other job to do except run a free, open, fair, frank election. And I can go right through timelines, but I just like to bring you guys into the discussion because I'm sure you've had exactly the same information given to you, and I can go into lots and lots of detail. Like, we reported this thing to the AEC on the 16th, which was the Monday leading into the election after we'd been informed by voters. And I didn't believe my ears when people were ringing me going, Steve, we're ringing you up because we've been told by the electoral staff that if we vote in those boxes above the line, our vote won't count. Or have you pulled out of the election? You know, none of these things were true. And then on the Wednesday, we actually put out to the Australian people recorded messages from the AEC saying exactly those words. We dubbed the voices so that nobody would be held accountable or their voices recognised for those particular staff. We actually protected them. But it is so sad in the world that we're living in today with all the disinformation, all the mainstream media who don't put the truth out there, and we're still copying this. They don't want to hear the truth. So I'll throw it back to you guys, and I hope I haven't spoken for too long.
You're right, Steve. Steve, can you tell us a little bit about the writs? There's been a lot of controversy about whether the writs were or were not valid with seals and things like that. Can you give us any more information about the writs?
I think Rod Carlton is probably the guy to talk to about the writs and also the seal. I mean, they are two separate topics to what we've been really going after. I mean, I can't tell you the absolute facts on that, but the information that I've seen is that a lot of the writs weren't stamped officially by the proper stamps they're supposed to have on them. I think the Queensland one may have been one of the only few in the country. And, you know, there is so much wrong that's happened in this election. The writs are people being told that they've got to vote 6 above the line on the Senate ticket or to fill in every box. And that's simply not true either. You know, when you read through the Scrutineer's Handbook on page 38 or 40, it actually states that you can actually vote 1. I mean, so many people have been misled, and it's very frustrating for myself, and I'm sure for all Australians and everybody watching this. I mean, all people want in this country, I believe, is a fair go. They want a fair election, and they want to know the people that they're paying this $500 million to can actually get it right.
Steve,
So-
if I can, sorry, Lance, you can go first.
You go, Ken.
Steve, I scrutineered at this election. It was the very first time that I've done anything like that. And I did it for my own personal education so I could learn and see what was going on. I actually questioned the poll workers about exactly what you're talking about, voting in the blank boxes, etc. They gave me personally the answers that your investigations have revealed. Several of them said, look, it won't work. It would be an invalid vote. I stayed right until the end of the count. It was only a very small area that I was in. And so I was only there till 11 o'clock at night. But I stayed right till the end of the count. I scrutineered everything and I watched them set ballots aside that had voted in those boxes. And they called them invalid votes, and they put them in the invalid voting pile. Now, during this week, I've been out and talking to members of my community and asking them about the election and what they think these types of things mean. And I've been raising this concern with them. Sadly, overwhelmingly, most people just say, oh, well, the government's not going to have another re-election. That'd be impossible. And many of them say, well, it's cost us so much. What do we do? Just go and have another one. And then we have to pay for that cost. And so sadly, it appears to me that they feel so hopelessly let down by the government, and they feel the government is so powerful that there's nothing they can do. And it appears that they're ready to just roll over and accept it. But they fail to see the importance of this. Perhaps you could talk about what this means. I mean, this is how we determine law in our country. And no one is happy with the state of our country. No one is. I can't find one person who will say, oh, the government's done a fantastic job.
And I will jump into that because I was having a discussion earlier today with a lady that I work with very, very closely. And when we grow up as kids, we go to primary school and we're told to tell the truth. If you get into trouble, reach out for a police officer, things through life. But, you know, right now, what we're being told to accept is accept lies, accept a false election, accept what you're being told over the telephone by these electoral staff, or being told to your face when you've gone in to vote on election day itself. Just accept that you can be lied to. Just accept that. No, I won't. And most Australians won't. I mean, I've grown up in the best country in the world, and I love my country. I'm 60 in the middle of this month. I've lived through the best times in history, but I think we are now a part of the worst times, because if they get away with it this time, what about next time and the time after? Is it going to get worse? Is it going to get worse? I've started watching a documentary late this afternoon about, I think it's called 2000 Mules. Gee, I'll tell you what, it's an education. It's about the rorting in the electoral system in the United States. And I tell you what, I think we've got 1,999 mules here in Australia, because I think our system is broken. It's got to be fixed. And do we give up and just shrivel up and hide? I don't think that's the answer. I think we have to face the truth full on. And in a perfect world, the Electoral Commission would come out and go, yep, we got it wrong. This is how we're going to go about fixing the system so it never happens again. That's what I hope and pray for. I pray to God every day of my life at this point in time, hoping for just that.
Steve, even if we had one person with just a bit of integrity who would say, yes, we got this wrong and it's got to be redone. Just one person with the courage to do that, to stand up, would start an avalanche and would get the ball rolling. I wonder if we're going to get someone within the AEC who actually cares about doing their job enough to protect their soul, to protect their integrity, and protect the goodness that should be in this country, that should be in Australia, that we grew up as kids knowing that Australia was a good place, it was safe, and that the truth meant something. I wonder if we can get just one person. Lance? Over to you, mate.
Yeah, that's great. I'll be that one person.
Yeah.
Look, I think there's plenty of people fighting this good fight. Steve's one of them. We know Darren Bergsworth down in Victoria and Dunkley. He's having this fight, and there's other people very interested in this fight. So it really comes down to, what can everyone do that's concerned about the future of our elections? What can they do to have an impact? What, you've been in Parliament a long time in your history. What would get the interest of the incumbent to fix this?
Very, very straightforward. I think at the moment, this thing, there's two factors. There's two ways we can roll this thing, and that's get it out into mainstream media, which we're not being very successful with here in Australia. We're getting it through all of our, and I'll call us, we're the fringe groups of media. We're doing everything we can to get it out to everyday Australians, but I think we need to get this in backfed through the United States. And I think we need to reach out to every single person watching your show, who watches my shows, who watches Z Media, who watches all of the people, the freedom-friendly people in this country, and backfeed it into Australia. Because you know what happened here is going to happen in the primary elections in the United States, probably 3 or 4 times as bad. So the other angle is we have to go legal at the same time, using their own laws against themselves. Because my philosophy is very straightforward. If we can beat the Australian Electoral Commission on this, which I believe we absolutely should be able to do so, but we need that benefactor. You know, when you go to court these days, you need a couple of $1 million up your sleeve, because that's what it's going to cost you to take these people on. You spend $2 million, they'll spend $4 million. I mean, if we can get into the High Court, get this thing heard before the writs, those particular things that we don't know if they're real or not, get put back on the 20th of this month, there could be hell to pay for the Electoral Commission. But if you break the wall and the dam, it's going to drain the swamp. And that's what we need to do in this country in more ways than one. This is much bigger than just the Australian Electoral Commission. This is a global issue that is compressing so many countries and so many people throughout the world. This is our chance to fight back. It's either believing in darkness or believing in light, believing in right or believing in wrong. It's good or evil. This is the world. You have to choose a side.
So could I talk to a couple of the concerns which I had about the election? First one is no voter ID. I could have been anybody voting on behalf of anybody and doing anything, and they would have never have known. Second, they're crossing our name off in a paper book that they've printed. I can only imagine tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of these things out of paper, right? Which is, we know the time we live in, you know, we know this is environmentally irresponsible. So there's another point. But the fiscal management, I mean, if it costs us $500 million, $500 million to run this election, surely we can run that for 1/10 of that price, 50 million, right? You're only talking about 18 million voters. So when you put a price on it per vote, it's not very cost effective. Now, we live in the 21st century, not the 18th century. You know, we should be able to vote. We should have a system where we can vote, like in Switzerland, where they can vote from home. And you log in and you log your vote, and it's counted in real time, and the result goes straight up. $500 million. If they're that irresponsible with the election, how bad are they with absolutely everything else?
Lance, think about where we've been over the last 2 years. You had to show identification to go in and buy a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
You know, we had to show identification because we couldn't cross borders. We couldn't leave our houses unless you showed, yeah, I've been jabbed, or no, I haven't been jabbed. Here's my certificate. This is the real world we're in today, and you nailed it in one. I mean, to go in to be able to vote and say, hey, my name's Jack Smith, give me a vote. That's just ridiculous in these day and times. And should we be able to do it more efficiently? I mean, most people have got onto the MyGov site. You know how to get onto these sites. They know who you are. That means you only get one vote. You can't go on a bus and drive around the neighborhood and vote half a dozen times. And people, I understand, have been doing just that type of thing. You know, I don't have proof on that one. That's anecdotal. But the stuff we have absolute crystal clear proof to prove everything that we've spoken about.
Steve,
sorry, Ken.
Sorry. No, we all want to jump in. Go ahead, Ainsley. It's your turn.
We're just also excited to hear what you've got to say on the matter. So yeah, just I'm curious, would blockchain solve this as a solution for putting our voting system on a blockchain solution where it can't be changed?
I haven't got into the kind of crypto sort of stuff or understand blockchain as well as most people probably should. I don't know enough about it to comment on. One of the other gentlemen may wish to comment on that one. They might think it's a great idea. I don't know. I can't tell you the answer.
I can tell you this. No, go ahead, mate.
No, you're good. We'll get it right tonight. We're not in sync yet. Keep going, Ken.
Well, okay, look, I can tell you something has to happen because exactly what you said before about you can drive around and vote in various places. Steve, I've met an ice cream man in Wynnum in Queensland. Wynnum is an eastern suburb in Queensland. He's just got an ice cream truck and drives around and sells ice cream to people. I met him and he had an interesting story to tell me. In the last state election in Queensland, he wanted to test something out because he had heard something from one of his friends who is a member of the Labor Party. So he went and tested out what he was told. He was told that you could go and vote at multiple booths and make your vote count as many times as you went to a different booth and that no one would question you over it. He didn't believe that was true. So he went and did it. He voted at 5 different booths on that day. He voted and his vote was counted at each place. And it was 9 months later that he finally called the Electoral Commission and told them what he had done, gave him his name and everything like that. And their response to him was, sir, please don't do that. You shouldn't do that.
What do I say?
Are you kidding me? That is exactly, I've met this guy and I've spoken to him face to face and I know who he is. I won't mention his name here because he was helping me understand the level of corruption. He was helping me understand that your name is recorded on paper at those various booths. And there's never a back check done to see who has voted more than once, or if someone is indeed deceased and someone was voting for them, etc., etc. There's no back check done. There are no balances and checks. There's no integrity. It's a failed system. Sorry, go ahead, Lance.
Oh, look, what I'd like to highlight and get your opinion of, Steve, is Labor got 32% of the primary vote, yet they were able to form a majority government. So that, for me, says a lot of people in Australia have completely, absolutely no representation whatsoever. Now, independents and freedom candidates, I believe, polled about 40% of the primary vote.
Well, I can't give you the exact figures. I actually have got them written down here, and I'll target one particular part of the vote, and just to give listeners a good understanding of the numbers that have dropped across Australia. The numbers in the lower house for independent candidates, I think it was about 5.43%. When you extrapolate that across to the upper house, it's less than 0.78, but that accumulates all independents plus everybody below the line. So in Queensland, the Katter Party was thrown into that because they didn't actually run above the line. But when you extrapolate every other party, be that the Labor Party, the Greens, One Nation, UAP, their vote is only 0.5% difference between the lower house and the upper house. If somebody could explain to me the mathematics of why independents lost nearly 5% somewhere in the transition from lower house to upper house, I'd love to understand that, because I don't. I'd like to know where those votes are gone and what impact would that have had on a free, fair election where voters were told by AEC staff not to vote for those people that have got empty boxes, just a letter. Those people are pulled out of the race, or if you vote in those boxes, your vote would be invalid. So there are very many flow-on effects from what's occurred in this election that need to be explained. It needs to be told to the people of Australia. And I want to emphasise this. We can't give up on this. If we let this go, what is democracy worth in our country? Because the election that just happened, in my opinion, is an absolute fraud. And Kent, I meant to say this to you before, and I know you're listening on the other end there. Could you please do me a statutory declaration relating to what you said? Because hopefully it will be used in a court case in the not too distant future.
It will be my pleasure to provide you with that, and I'll get it done this week.
That'd be great.
Perfect.
Steve, one of our listeners, Willie, she said, how's it possible? Because she was still scrutineering, at a very small polling booth of 424 votes, and Albanese was already called the winner at 8 p.m. Now, I'm over here in the West, and we barely shut the polls over here, and it was almost like they were announcing who the Prime Minister was, and we'd barely even finished voting over here. How is that even possible?
Ainsley, I've never seen an election like this one call so quickly. Like I've been involved in politics for nearly 20 years, and sometimes it goes to days, even weeks later. Both of the major parties have suffered losses. Their vote has dropped exponentially, and there wasn't a person that I knew that weren't putting all the majors or the Greens last. So, getting back to the statement Lance made before, it could very easily be 40% of the country have voted for freedom-friendly parties across our country. Where did that vote go, and why wasn't the system of preferential voting used? Because my understanding from many, many reports are that on that evening, they just had the Labor, the Liberal Party vote, and then they went to the smaller votes and just said, what's the main votes? Are they Labor or are they Liberal? End of story. And, there have been, I don't even know that the Electoral Commission has declared all of the seats as yet, but the politicians are very quick to jump onto those leather seats and travel all over the world.
Spending taxpayers' money, no doubt.
It's quite unbelievable how quickly it rolled out. It was like watching a pantomime. It's like, hang on a second, doesn't matter what we're doing here. So, okay, so we're in this position, right? How do we maximize the effort? We've got several legal cases running in Australia. How do we make sure that we can get one of these to be a winner? Where do you want people to put their effort?
I'll be very straightforward. We all need a benefactor who can afford to fight these people in court. That's the real truth. I mean, we have the information. I'm sure Rod has got the information over in WA. I'm sure Monica and Morgan have got information down in Victoria. I know so many people have got so much information, And we need somebody who has got the wherewith to be able to drive this home, because what is the future of our country worth? Once we've given into misleading statements, once we've been given into a fraudulent election, once we've given into all of this, we're lost as a country, because it's never going to get better unless you cut the cancer out and get rid of it. Expect it to spread and expect it to get worse every time you go back and look, and it will. And I'm saddened to say these words. This country has got so much to offer. We are mineral rich. We have some smart people. We can do so much good and probably house a whole lot more people than what we've actually got in this country now, and be great food producers. But what are we doing? We are too busy fighting some bloody plague that didn't really happen. This other C thing that we're not allowed to talk about on our type of media networks or our outlets, it was the 38th biggest killer in Australia, but we shut the borders down, stopped people coming here. I mean, the madness continues. The next thing I hear about now is monkeypox, or call it whatever you like. It might be crocodile dots. Who knows? We are going to have some other plague that because they've trained us now. We've accepted to be locked in our homes. We've accepted that borders can be closed when we are faced with the 38th biggest killer in Australia.
Is it worthwhile us contacting our so-called elected representatives at a federal level and saying, we think this was a sham election? What are you doing to fix this? That's the first thing. Second thing is, we've got 3, 4, 5 million freedom-loving Australians. If we put a couple of bucks each into a war chest, we can probably fund these really awesome actions and bring about some effective change and some accountability into this election. And I think by doing that, we would generate the public interest and expose the fraud for what it's worth. But is there a safe place that money can go? Because our government will say, you're domestic terrorists, and they're going to gobble it up and they're going to steal it like they did to Dave O'Neill's raising money for the floods.
Lance, you've nailed it. And we've actually stayed away from asking people for money. We could have done it long ago, and people have actually offered us money, but we've kept right away from that. I mean, to me, that's the last resort, to tap into the Australian people. I mean, there are some people out there, and I know quite a few wealthy people, and I haven't even gone and tapped them on the shoulder, but we have tapped some very, very wealthy people, and we've asked them to get behind this and actually take it on board. I mean, this is about the future of Australia as a whole. A lot of people have been very successful out of this country, and, I'm calling on as many of them as I humanly can out there. Get together, back your country, back the freedom fighters, because we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for our country. We're doing it purely for the love of our country. The race is over for Steve Dickson running in a Senate competition. That doesn't matter. I did it to put some points out there, and this thing has just fallen into our laps. We never asked for this to happen, but the truth is the truth is the truth, and you can't walk away from it. If you deny the truth, you believe the lie.
Absolutely. Hey, we've got Darren Bergsworth sitting there with his hand raised, Ainsley. Do you want to see what Darren's got to say?
Chuck him in.
We might bring Darren in, and
Darren,
because I know
there?
he's running a big campaign, Steve, and look, he's a real fighter. He's a brawler.
How you going, guys?
Yeah, good, Darren.
He's a good-looking bloke too, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
I must have it too close.
I was going to say, good to see you dressed up for the occasion, Darren.
Yeah, I know. No, it's underneath. It's just a bit chilly down in Melbourne at the moment.
It's cold enough here in Buderim, mate. We're in Queensland.
Yeah. I wish I was up there. Listen, look, I listened to you before and about what we should be able to do. And personally, we've never been united once in this whole freedom movement in the last 18 months. We really haven't. We've almost got there in Canberra, just to have our hearts torn out on the 12th of February this year. And if we can't unite now, it's it's all very well trying to get money from around the country, but we really need to get all the people that have got skin in the game here need to get together, need to get in a room, sit down, nut out the best way to go forward. Because a united front with everybody's platforms, we need 2 or 3 million people watching this case from all around Australia to make it actually play out in the court of public opinion, and not just fringe groups firing little arrows from the corner of Queensland, the corner of Victoria, and the corner of Western Australia. It's not going to work. They'll pick us off one by one. If we have a united front for the first time in this freedom movement with court action and bring it all together under the one umbrella, I think we've got a lot to work with. These writs are a massive thing that no one's given them enough credibility. I mean, these writs are fraudulent, straight up. End of story, right? We don't have a premier signing a writ for an election. Okay, so it goes way deeper than that. The information we've got goes way deeper. I'm not going to put it out on a public forum like this, but we've got some really heavy hitting stuff, and we need to get and I know Rod Cullerton has it as well, and he's been sitting there for 2.5 weeks since the election. I haven't heard from him yet, but if we don't come together now and unite for once, then I'm telling you, we're not going to win.
Darren, I think you've nailed it. I mean, I ran an election as an independent, and I worked with every different organisation we had. There was party people, but it wasn't the Labor Party, and it wasn't the Liberal Party, and it wasn't the Greens. It was everybody else. They actually all unitedly worked together. I was down in Canberra as well, mate. I was up the front of that little bit of a crowd with Woody when we marched up the road, and we had the lead car there. I nearly got run over by the bloody thing, but I think there was closer to 1 million people there than 10,000 as well. But I think you are nailing it. If we don't come together, we're giving our country away. And I mean, there's nothing in this for us, mate. We're getting older in life. I mean, I've lived a great life through the best times in history, but we're going into the worst times in history, and we're about to bury our children and bury our grandchildren through access stupidity and bastardization of the political process and not being united. I agree with you wholeheartedly, but how do you do that? How do you get people not to fight over the bones of defeat? They all want their little shit heap somewhere that they're in control of. And you know what? That's all they're ever going to have. They're not going to be able to bring the country together. And that's what we need. I mean, mate, you should be Prime Minister with that sort of language that you're speaking, because it's true. That's all we need, mate. You don't have to be a bloody genius. You just got to be somebody who can bring people together, united cause, and all those issues that we've spoken about, be it the issue we're talking about, be it about the seal, be it about the writs, they should all go together in one case. I mean, I was told many years ago, when you go to court, use a shotgun because you're going to hit something.
Yep. That's it. Yeah. That's it. We've got to do it. We've got to get together. And I've been working my ass off for the last week, trying to ring all the players. The only one I probably haven't spoken to at this stage is Morgan and Monica, because they seem to be lone soldiers, and they're the last one, and also Rod. So I'm trying to reach out to them. I'm trying to reach out to everybody to let's get together. There's no rushing this. All those ones barging at the gate at the moment, trying to barge through the gate, are they're going to get mowed down. We need to just kind of relax for a little bit. There's no rush. The return of the writs is the 28th of June. So we've got a couple of weeks up our sleeve. We need to get together next week, and we need to start to discuss what kind of evidence we've all got, put it all together, and work out our best strategy. Because just trying to do it from small fringe groups, and if you make one mistake, if you haven't got the right person, the right language in that court case, they're going to throw it out. They're going to throw it out in 2 seconds. So we've got someone, and Lance, you know who I'm talking about. The guy's a genius. He really is, and he knows the law inside out. And I really think he's our best chance. And we don't have to pay him squillions of dollars to get this done. So, look, we need to offline. We need to get together. We need to contact each other and start the process of arranging that meeting where we can all get in the same room.
And Zoom is a really good idea, as we've seen with this. And as far as Monica and Morgan are concerned, I'll vouch for them. They're pretty good people. And I've spoken to Rod over in WA as well. And I've not been trying to bring people together, but I think you've nailed it. We do have to bring people together. I don't know the answer at the end of the day. I'm not a lawyer, but what I know is I know the truth when I see it. I know the truth when I hear it. I know the truth when it's in my hands. And at the moment, we have what I believe is the truth about AEC staff in Australia misleading Australian voters, not just here, not in an isolated area, but right across this whole country.
And not only that, but the election should never have gone ahead. It was a fraud before it even began, because there was never a legal writ issued or advertised before we even started. And I took that to and claimed victory on the 6th of the 16th as well, because I was the only legitimate candidate under our constitution. And none of these writs are illegal. Now, the election shouldn't have gone ahead, and the election needs to be rerun, and that's the end of it. Disinformation or not, and I'm sure we've got plenty of stat decks that we can file into our affidavit as well. But the whole election was fraudulent before we even run it.
So the Australia Project is about bringing people together. That's our job. That's what we're doing, and coming up with solutions. Now, look, I knew from the start this election would be more cooked, right, than a kangaroo at a barbecue. So I'm telling you, we knew. And I'm all for creating an alternative platform, a different system, and moving people out of this system, because it is so broken. Our tax laws are broken. Everything. We're so over-regulated. Red tape, green tape, blue tape. They've got a different color tape for every time they want to change something. So, but here's a golden opportunity, okay? And I would get behind promoting. We get 1 million freedom people, $10 each, right? We put it into the solicitor's trust account, and that's to be used for the court cases. We got $10 million. And that gives everyone breathing space, because my major concern with rich people is this too. They're always driving their agenda, and we never know whether they're really with us or whether they're against us. So you've always got to look at their ulterior motive. But when you get money from the Australian public, and just remember, Australian public, we, the taxpayers, have just paid $500 million for an absolute schmozzle. So I think we can dig in, find $10 million, fund some decent litigation, and hopefully bring these guys to accountability.
The only problem I see with that, Lance, is quite simply the Bar Association are not there for justice. They're there to line their own pockets, and they will railroad this case. They'll get a bigger paycheck if they take us down the wrong path or make a mistake or just by accident kind of thing. I don't think we can trust the Bar Association or solicitors, to be quite frank.
Well, maybe if they know there's 3 million Australians looking at everything they do, they might think a little bit differently. These guys have got to be looking over their shoulder and thinking, hang on a second, this whole thing that's happening, it's going to flip. And when it flips, where are they?
That's why I want everyone on the same page. We need millions following this case like it's the O.J. Simpson case, so it plays out in the court of public opinion. So everyone with a platform of 30, 50, 60,000 people, all bring it onto one central stage. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. All right,
Darren,
sorry, Steve. I was
no,
just gonna,
you
zip Darren out now, and we'll get back to our interview with you.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, mate.
nice to meet you.
We'll get you on another time, Darren. Sorry, Steve. You can still ask a question because he can still hear you. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we do have to bring people together, but we've got to fight them with their own rules at the moment. And I do understand where Darren and many other people are coming from. It's just where we sit today is we don't have a lot of time, and I'm probably of a different opinion. I think we have to head into this thing headlong. We've got to fight it now, because it will become old news, and that's what the media want to do. They don't want to put this in front of the public. I mean, can you imagine if the whole of the Australian public knew that we were all being lied to and misled by Australian electoral staff? I mean, just think about that one statement in itself. If every single Australian knew that they were lied to, how would that really wash? None of us like to be lied to. Parents of children don't like their kids lying to them. I don't like to be lied to. I'm sure you don't like to be lied to. None of us do. But what's happened is we have been. And, when we go through the facts that we have, we warned them on the Monday before the election, because we'd been told by constituents that they were putting out misleading information to voters. Then on the Wednesday, we put a video up with all of those people from the Electoral Commission making exactly the same statements. Don't vote in those empty boxes above the line. Your vote will be invalid. Then on the Friday, we went to the AFP. We made an official complaint in person to the AFP. We were interviewed for an hour and a half, and it was very serious. Then on the Saturday of the election, we had a video sent to us of a guy who went in there and videoed him voting, and he's an alternative media guy, and they said exactly the same thing to him on the Saturday. I mean, they knew from day one, and they actually commented on our Facebook site on the Wednesday evening, and that story was shared 5,000 times on our site. It reached 100,000 people in about 48 hours. I mean, a lot of people know this stuff, but how can that possibly be acceptable? Particularly when we have recordings, audio, we have videos, and we have statutory declarations stating that from every state in our country. You know, fair question, but we're not getting fair answers from the AEC. And I do believe that we should approach every politician, but more so, write to the Australian Electoral Commission, email them, ring them up, ask them why these questions aren't being answered, because they can only say nothing for so long. But we've got to be strong and united as a country. Can you imagine if they got 4 million phone calls or 4 million emails? It's going to crash their system.
So I've got something to put to you here just so that I can highlight this. I come from a strong background of law enforcement with nearly 2 decades as a police officer. The actions of the AEC that I have investigated myself and the things that I've seen, the evidence that I've seen, makes me strongly believe that members of the AEC have committed crimes during this election. That's what it looks like. That's extremely sobering that this government department, it looks very strongly that they have committed the crimes of fraud, the crime of fraud in multiple places, and that they knew that they had failed the people of Australia by not having the necessary documentation in place for this election to be lawful. They also knew that these names, several names, were left off of these ballots. I refuse to believe that it was simply a printing error. And even if it was a printing error, once it was brought to their attention, in order for Australia to have a free and fair election, it should have been postponed. The ballot papers should have been brought back in. An honest explanation should have been given to the Australian people, etc., etc. Okay, so my honest belief is that these are crimes. Now, what happens is that information, those complaints will go to lower ranking police. It will then be taken out of their hands by senior ranking police. And my opinion is that it will then disappear, because that's how government reaches out to senior ranking police officers who are hoping to be promoted, who are part of the club, so to speak, and they're controlled with promises and threats concerning their future careers. Now, I've personal first-hand evidence, and I've witnessed this happen before in police services across the country. That's the type of corruption that we're facing. Remember, police swear an oath they will enforce the law without fear and without favour, and they fail us when they don't do that. Now, given that we've got these, what I believe are crimes committed by the AEC, we have several avenues. The people of Australia need to make complaints to their local police about this. These are crimes, people, right? So we need to be writing letters detailing our concerns to the Australian Federal Police about what took place in our area, within our own electorate. That's one action that can be taken. We need to hold our elected officials to account. We need to demand that they investigate this, that they show their integrity, that they show their courage as fair sportsmen and women of Australia who don't want to win unfairly, who want to say, look, I'm in this position now, but it probably didn't happen fairly. I've got the guts and the integrity to stand up and say, look, this is wrong. I've looked at it. I've got serious concerns. I don't want this position. I don't probably lawfully represent my constituents. And because I have integrity, I want to stand up and I want to see this election done properly. And we need to hold them to account. We need to write them those letters and we need to ask them, what will you do about it? And then we need to follow up. Unfortunately, this is going to take a lot of work. And a lot of people will say, I've got too much on in my life. But Steve, you and I both know the pain that we put off today magnifies. It gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And if Australia will not act on this now, and if we can't coordinate them to act on this now, the next piece of pain coming will be magnified exponentially. It will not just be 1 or 2 times worse. It's going to be 5 and 10 and 20 times worse, because we know from history, the politicians, many of the politicians who get into power, you give them the inch and they will take the proverbial mile. They get worse and worse and worse. So these are the actions that, as I said, we need to take. We need to be making complaints to the Australian Federal Police. We need to be making complaints to our local elected officials and demanding that they take action and demanding that they give a thorough and proper answer to what took place. And we need to pursue this in the courts. And each one of us as an Australian needs to bear the personal responsibility and be prepared to give to this. And I think even though there are difficulties, I think we need to find a way to overcome those difficulties by managing those finances, find a way we can keep the money safe. I mean, imagine that, Australians donating money to a cause and politicians taking that money and using it for other means. That's never happened before, has it?
I think you've touched on some really, really important stuff there, Kent. And I think people who come forward as well, you know, if they put a PID in place, a public interest disclosure, if they do work for the government, is something I would advise people to do that work for the government, because there are a lot of whistleblowers out there now at the AEC. I think you're right about people emailing to the Australian Federal Police, because that will only support what myself and probably Rod Carlton and many other official complaints with the Australian Federal Police. But I think we need to bombard them. The money thing, I'm still not quite there yet about asking the Australian people for money. If we can get a big hitter to come out, it would be just much cleaner, so much straightforward. And at the end of the day, if somebody's got self-interest in taking the Australian Electoral Commission to court, they're my best friends. And I don't care. You know, if we have got to ask the Australian people for, you know, to kick the can, I will do that at some stage in the future, but this has to happen very, very soon. You know, like we're pretty close to the wire. We're starting to get burned out ourselves. We ran an election campaign. We've been doing this with a very small group, gathering intel, getting these stat decks, getting these videos, audios, and processing it all so that it can actually be given to a lawyer so he can make an assessment. I mean, this is not a simple task. And I think Kent really started to touch on those things that we can do, have to do, and get done in a certain period of time, because time is not our friend.
Yeah. And I think, like, we used to have these letter writing to all the sorts of the doctors and the politicians before, and I think this would be a really good one to reinstigate and get our members, especially members of our TAP satellite groups, to get all their members to start writing those letters. And also, once this video comes out, because we have, we're just getting started with the number of people that are jumping on these videos, to go out and share this video with everybody in their TAP satellite groups, hear the messages that the guys are talking about, hear the steps that Kent is putting forward, not just for this election, although not just for what's happened in this election, but now that we've got these people in power, to now hold them accountable every step of the way with what our will and intent is that we want them to achieve. And if they don't do that, then enforce that in a court of law going forward. So I think that's over the years, I mean, it's something that I never knew we had to do in politics. I must admit, I've not been one in the past that's been terribly interested in politics. And certainly this year has been the first year that I've really sort of stood up and taken notice. And through all my learnings with, other groups, really realised the importance of, why we should be putting our will and intent out there and holding our politicians accountable. And a lot of Australians are not doing that. And I think if more and more did that, like what Kent said, not just for this, but for ongoing, we would probably have a much better result, and they wouldn't just be doing whatever the hell they like, because we're not doing that. And so they just do that.
Ainsley, you're right, Ainsley. I mean, many Australians actually don't really care too much about politicians. They don't care too much about elections. They go and vote because they don't want to get a fine, and that's probably half the people in this country, it's a terrible indictment upon all of us. But you know what? We are all responsible for the country being in the state that it's in today. Every single one of us. All we got to do is look in the mirror. We let this shit happen. Now we've got to fix this mess up. And if we do not stand up unitedly together now, we're toast. It's over and done, folks. I mean, look at what's happening around the world. It's coming to a store near you soon. Be it the United States, be it what's happening over in the USSR, as we used to call it. The shit is hitting the fan in a lot of places. We've got food shortages going on, electricity prices going through the roof. If you didn't notice, interest rates went up today. How many people are going to be forced to, we're going to buy food, we're going to buy petrol, we're going to send the kids to school? These are decision-making times right now. You know how it all happened? Through an election that wasn't held properly. We may have different people in place at the moment, but we don't. We've got the group that are there at the moment, be that fraudulently or not, but we've got to fix this system. If you can't have fair, free, frank elections, everything else doesn't really matter. You're living in a false world.
So a couple of points I'd like to make that you've raised. Interest rates. There is no correlation between interest rate increases and downward pressure on inflation. It is just punishing the Australian people. The cost to cash for the Reserve Bank and for the Australian banks is at an all-time low, right? There's plenty of supply, and this is just absolute gouging. That's all it is. So that's the first point on interest rates. This is poor fiscal management by the government, by the Reserve Bank. And remember, the Reserve Bank's got nothing to do with the government. They're completely controlled by offshore interests. So they don't care. They're just gouging. That's the first thing. Second, the Australian Federal Police. Okay, what a bunch of scurrilous scumbag criminals. And I can call them that because it's been in front of Parliament. Everyone knows they deliberately and knowingly used weapons-grade microwave weapons on peaceful, lawful protests. And what happened? It was exposed in Parliament. Not one person was held to account for that. Think about that. They fried people's faces. Now, we know the short-term effect. My face peeled 4 times, right? That's how burnt I was. But what about the long-term effects? What about the effects it has on your brain and your organs and your eyes? We don't know those long-term effects yet. These are the grubs that wear a uniform and pretend to be there to protect the Australian people. They're not there to protect the Australian people. Australian people need to wake up, okay? Your government is not interested in helping you. Your government is interested in opposing you. Grow up, people. Let's get in the gap. This is the space in between where all the people are asleep and the baddies are trying to come for us. I call that space the gap. Get in the gap, get involved, write letters, complain to your members of parliaments, put pressure on these people. They don't like pressure. And there are still some good people in Parliament. So we find them, we assist them to get the job done.
Lance, there's something I'd like to touch on, and I didn't bring it up earlier. It's about the AEC, and they've created what is called a disinformation register. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but I'd ask all the listeners to please look it up, because I've got 2 documents here that I printed off because we've kept a copy of everything. This is what myself and many people are accused of saying. The AEC has told pre-poll voters that independent Senate candidates with a blank column over their name above the line have withdrawn from the election. And then it goes on to explain how they didn't do that. And they actually say that some of their staff inadvertently may have given out that information. And then it goes on, our social media accounts swiftly corrected this disinformation. The AEC also informed the media representatives to correct it. Then you move forward to only a few days ago, they changed their story. So the disinformation unit decided to put out a new narrative because that one wasn't working so good. And it reads here, this was the complaint. A few instances of polling officials telling voters upon inquiry that they cannot number an unnamed box above the line on the Senate ballot paper is evidence of widespread and deliberate subversion by Senate election results. The blank columns, and it goes on yada, yada, yada about it. And they say, we've got 105,000 staff and, you know, we educate them well, but their narrative is changing because they've been caught with the hand in the cookie jar. The point I'm making is they set up a disinformation unit. They've tried to let the Australian people know, people like myself, all independent candidates, probably people like yourself, we all wear tinfoil hats. You know, we spread gossip, but the word disinformation, it's basically got criminal intent tied to it. There is a big difference between misinformation and disinformation. Disinformation is an intent lie. Misinformation is, I'm a lunatic and I just got it wrong. So they are saying that we are liars, that people like myself, potentially people like yourself, right across this country, we are lying because we put out this information in front of them, which we can substantiate. It is the real truth. All we want them to do is face the real truth, not spend $500 million on disinformation units, giving us a bad election. Just tell us the hard, cold truth. And when you make a mistake, fess up to it. We all move forward then. But now we've got to fight the bastards. And I hate it, but Australia, we either come together, do something about it tangible, or let it go to the keeper and suck up what you're going to get for the rest of your future, because your future is going to be very short.
Yeah, so on that, I would like to say, in my opinion, they're scared of fraud. They're scared that they've committed fraud and they'll be held accountable for fraud. Now, the Senate paper is a classic example. The blank boxes. They knew beforehand, they had been told beforehand that they were wrong, and they chose to do nothing to fix it. And they never even put the good information out to the booths to say, hey, this is what's happened. The Senate papers are mucked up. If people ask, we will supply the names for you to write them in underneath the ballot paper, sign the ballot paper, and let them tick which box that they may. They made no effort to fix that ballot paper, none whatsoever. Now,
Lance, I don't like butting in on you, but I just got a tunnel vision on this thing. We accept that they put the blank boxes there with the letters beside it. That is now a side issue. It's when you've got electoral staff telling Australian voters they're not running anymore. If you vote in that box, your vote will be invalid. That's misleading the Australian voter. That is, I'll say it, they've been lying to the Australian voters by saying these things because it's false. It's not true. That issue, they keep trying to take us down the path of the empty box. Yes, that's a problem, and that should be legislatively fixed. But that's not our problem. Our problem is electoral staff misleading the Australian voter. That's unacceptable. And I apologise for butting in on you.
No, and I think I'm going to say that they were lying to the Australian public because a lack of leadership from the AEC downstream. So this isn't, oh, we thought we were doing the right thing. They knew they were doing the wrong thing. And ultimately, any organization's head has to take responsibility for their subordinates. And if their subordinates are poorly trained, well, you've got plenty of money and plenty of time to do it right. So it's not an excuse, because this happened across the board. So this was a catastrophic, I believe, deliberate failure deliberate failure.
So when it's
Lance,
when it's a deliberate failure by managers, that's called malfeasance. Okay, and that's
you
right?
got it.
That's malfeasance, right? And that's a crime. And when you deliberately, when you're told and you're advised of something, and you know it's wrong, but then you advise your subordinates on how to respond, and you advise them in an incorrect manner, and then they go out and do that, and then you try and cover that. That's called fraud. That needs to be investigated. And then there's something else here, because there's the doctrine of vicarious liability, which means your employees who are working for you, who do the wrong thing because you've told them to do the wrong thing. It means you're liable for that. It means you're responsible for the money that is lost and associated with that. So we're talking malfeasance, fraud, and through vicarious liability, we're talking about the right to sue not only the Australian Electoral Commission, but the managers of the Australian Electoral Commission who have committed malfeasance. That's how serious this is. We're talking the loss of their wealth, and there could even be the ability to implement the Proceeds of Crime Act, because the major political parties have sustained the Australian Electoral Commission in this, and they've received money from the Australian Taxation Department, which is called election funding, nearly $3 per vote. They've received that money, and that money needs to go back into the public purse strings. That's where we're at, and that's proceeds of crime. And I'll tell you what, the steps to complete that investigation are so simple and so obvious that there are many police officers in this country who could investigate that, and we're talking just constables, low-ranking constables could investigate that crime, and I'm confident they could have a win.
I got to jump in. Malfeasance, you are the third person in the last 24 hours who's driven that point home. I'd never heard of the word ever before in my life, and I have heard it from you, and you are right on the money. I just know that we can win this thing. And think about it like this, Australia. You've got to get behind people like Kent, get behind people like Lance, and get behind this station, because you guys are getting a good, clean message out to the Australian people. We need all Australian support at the moment, because not one of us can do this by ourselves. But Kent, I need you to get my phone number from Lance or from Ainsley.
I've got it, mate. I've got it.
I wanted, and I know you live here somewhere in Queensland, and we can't be that far away, mate. I want to talk to you really soon, as in probably tomorrow morning or when we get off the air tonight.
Sounds good.
Ken, if I may just touch on the topic of fraud, because going through a few legal issues and things like that, they always say that fraud is a very big, let's say, accusation to put out there, and a lot harder to prove in a court of law. So how do we go about that in terms of, we're saying the election was fraudulent. How do we go about getting all that evidence for the proof of that?
Right. Like any crime is broken down into elements of an offence. Now, the reason fraud is so difficult is because there's a lot of different levels of intent to prove with it. And that's simply the case with fraud. But the malfeasance, once the malfeasance is proven, and this is why they're so scared, because once the malfeasance is proven, and we've got so much public evidence on this, because the Australian Electoral Commission was advised in an ongoing election that these indiscrepancies, these improper conditions were existing on the ballot papers. Once they saw them, they should have stopped it then and there, right? They should have stopped it then and there. This is something that the Australian people pay the Australian Electoral Commission to do. They're under contract to us to do that. They've got a moral obligation to do that. Now, they should have stopped straight away. When they didn't stop, that proves the deliberate intent. Everything flows after that. I have no doubt in my mind that this is fraud. I have no doubt in my mind that once the malfeasance is proven, and I believe there's ample evidence, you cannot just get up there and say, look, yes, I was told that these things were there. I was told that these improper conditions existed, and I am at a level where I'm paid a couple of $100,000 a year to make the call on this. I'm well trained. I know it's wrong. Well, then I'm sorry. Why did you not stop it? Because I can bet you, I'll bet you any money, it's spelled out in their contract and in their terms of service. A condition like this would be an election stopping condition. I've been trying to get into the contracts to take a look in the Australian Electoral Commission and look at what their code of conduct demands them to do, and I can't get access to it. So, but that definitely needs to be looked at, because once the malfeasance is proven, then the intent is proven, and it will be taken to be across the board. Because remember, in this legal system that we live in, silence is consent. But this is not just silence, okay? This was an active communication to their subordinates on how to deal with this matter. And there are documents that were produced by them that they substantiated, and they're under a contract to the Australian people. Oh yes, I very firmly believe that this is fraud, and I very firmly believe it will be able to be proven. So, and once that's proven, then all the money that's gone out to the candidates who received 4% or more, that's proceeds of crime.
Yep.
It's money that came out of the Australian purse string to go to people that should not have gone out. And remember, these are our elected officials. If they won't turn this around and say, hey, look, obviously there's something wrong here, then we're looking at malfeasance on every one of them as well.
Kent, this is you've touched on something super important. We did an interview with the Epoch Times going back a week and a bit ago, and he actually got in touch with the Electoral Commission and he asked them about the disinformation site. And he asked them particularly about what memo did you send out to let the staff know that they were getting it wrong? And you know what the answer was?
What?
We did it verbally.
We did it verbally.
105,000 phone calls.
Well, you can take care of that in a smoko break, Steve. Obviously, that's the truth. You know, obviously that's true. That they wouldn't. The Australian Electoral Commission would never lie to cover themselves or protect themselves. They just wouldn't do that.
Well, they've actually done it in writing now, because he wrote that in his story. I mean, you've nailed it, because we warned them on the 16th by writing our letter of complaint. We have an official file number for that complaint that went in Monday the 16th. The 18th, we did a live video out to the world with those recordings, and the Electoral Commission commented on our site. First time I've ever seen that happen in 20 years of being involved in politics. They said, you know, their gung-ho media unit said, oh no, this is, you know, you're getting this wrong. Are you doing this just to please your viewers? That's the content of the message. So they knew on the Wednesday, they knew on the Monday, they knew on the Wednesday. The federal police knew on the Friday, but the commissioner of the Electoral Commission came out on the Thursday and said, we've set up a disinformation unit. So he's coming out now clubbing the victim. You know, he has come after us to club the victims of the people who warned him. And we did that with good intent. We've given them that warning to go fix the problem before the election arrives. Then the election arrives and it's still happening. So intent, product.
Oh, look,
how do you fix that?
Look, and it goes even deeper than that, Steve. It's a terrible, terrible can of worms. I mean, and in the end, if the Australian people get behind this, what they're going to try and do is try and get one person to fall on their sword and resign, and try and blame them. It can't be allowed to go that way. But I know that's what I know that is what they will try and do. But let's take a look at this. I love it when they said, oh, look, we made phone calls. We called them on the phone. So a few interviews down the track, we might find a few people who said, yes, I was called. So we make a list of all the people who are prepared to say, oh, yes, I was called and I was told that. And then we interview a few people who are further down who say, well, no, I wasn't told anything about it. And then we identify the managers who are prepared to say, yes, I was called, which of course I believe will be a participation in the cover-up. And yet their subordinates weren't told. And then we're looking at them for malfeasance. And when they realize that they're in trouble for malfeasance and that they've caused a fraudulent $500 million Australian election, then we'll see if their stories change.
I get it. Oh, I get it.
Right.
That's where it sounds good. It sounds great in theory. I mean, I just think we've banged our heads so much over the last few weeks. I feel like we've been dragged up dry gullies, not that there's many of them about with the rainfall we've had. It is hard yards. And you've actually lifted my spirits a little bit tonight about the malfeasance and about the way the process should unfold. But it's about how we make that next step happen.
It is. It is about how we make that next step happen. And we need to be, as a nation, advising the Australian Federal Police. If you men and women don't get off your behind and investigate this thoroughly, prepare for our disgruntlement.
Yeah.
I don't know what form that will take. I think that a lot of Australians feel very, very let down by the system. And I think it's time that there was a new system.
And something interesting I'll add, if the Australian Federal Police won't do their job, and look, you know, when you look at the past failures like Mick Kelty and the Bali Nine and stuff like that, there's every suggestion that they won't do their job. You don't need the Federal Police to run a criminal trial to bring criminal charges. Your barristers, QCs, lawyers can put that criminal trial together and still get those people in front of the court. So sooner or later, we're going to find a judge that's going to do the right thing in this whole hullabaloo. And so it's a matter of time and it's a matter of effort, and we've got to stay the course. We've got to support good people in their campaigns where it's the right thing for Australia. We fix this time, we can move forward with confidence. If we don't, we go to the dark, and no one wants to be there. So let's all jump on board, bring it together. Look, it's taken us all night, but I think we've actually got to the nitty-gritty of the problems that are facing Australia. And it is pure incompetence and probably a fairly broad band of absolute corruption as well, guys. But keep your chin up. There's plenty of good players, and we're going to get this across the line.
So speaking of time, guys, we are well over time tonight, but I tell you what, I think tonight's conversations, you would agree with me, everybody, if you're still here listening, and we certainly haven't lost many people, there's some certain action steps that you've got from Kent that you need to go out and do and help us get these results that we need, and also to share this video. Going to do our best to get it up later tonight and share this video out so that all those that didn't jump on live can actually hear these messages and hear what is being said, and can also jump on and take some action. So thank you, Steve. It's been an absolute cracker of an interview tonight. You guys would agree with me. Thank you, Kent. Thank you, Lance, for all the input and the questions. And to our viewers, thank you for listening in our third episode. We're just going to get better, guys. We have a few little technical glitches on the way, but we're just going to get better and better. I'm going to take this opportunity before we close tonight, because we have a really important event coming up this weekend called Dark to Light. And I would really love each and every one of you to make an effort to go to a location near you. It's the covidcandlevigil.com website, or you can find it on the main tap page. And please go and support that, remembering everyone who's been affected by this over the last 2 years, whether it be through sickness or through losing their jobs or losing their business. And sadly, even some have lost their lives. If you know someone, or maybe you've experienced that yourself, get along to one of these events, because it is time to come together. It is an unbranded event, and it's time to come together, unite together, support each other, and remember those that have done it tough over the last 2 years. We've certainly got a long way to go, guys, and we're here to do this journey with you. So thank you everyone for being here. We look forward to seeing you next week on Triple Tap.
Thanks,
God bless
guys.
you all.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Thank
Good
you.
night,
God bless you.
everybody.
Bye for now.
Yeah.
God bless everyone.
Cheers.
See you.